The scene was pure, unadulterated chaos, unfolding on the one piece of ground in the world where I was supposed to have peace. My own front lawn. 10 of my platoon mates, my brothers, stood with me in a silent, disciplined half-circle. They were in civilian clothes, but they moved with a quiet, unnerving precision that made the air crackle with tension. In front of us, on the porch of my own house, a family of strangers were screaming into their phones, their faces pale with panic. And on the sidewalk, the architect of all this madness, Pam, the president of our HOA, was having a full-blown public meltdown. They're intimidating my tenants. She shrieked at the 2 local police officers who had just arrived, their faces a mask of confusion. This is a coordinated gang stalking. They're a militia. You have to arrest them. All of them. This is my community, and I will not have it terrorized by these thugs. The 2 officers looked from her hysterical face to our calm, silent group, and then to the terrified family on the porch. They were caught in the middle of a situation they didn't understand, a bizarre civil dispute that was threatening to boil over into something much worse. They looked at my lieutenant, who had just stepped forward to speak, and it was clear they were about to make a choice. A choice that would determine whether I got my home back or ended up in the back of their patrol car. That's when everything went wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment. What would you do if this happened to you? And subscribe to HOA Files. To understand that moment, you have to understand what a home means to a soldier. My name is Marcus Thorne. I'm a Sergeant First Class in the United States Army. I'm an airborne ranger. For 15 years, my home has been a series of dusty tents, noisy barracks, and cramped metal boxes in the sky. My life has been lived in the deserts of Iraq and the mountains of Afghanistan, in places where the only certainty is the loyalty of the man standing next to you. 3 years ago, I did something I had only ever dreamed of. I took all my savings, my combat pay, my re-enlistment bonuses, and I bought a house. A real house, with a lawn and a garage, in a quiet, respectable-looking subdivision called Liberty Ridge. It was close to my home base, a place where other military families lived. It wasn't a mansion. It was a simple, 3-bedroom ranch house. But it was mine. It was my anchor to the normal world. It was my own personal piece of the American dream that I had spent my entire adult life defending. Community had a homeowners association, of course. I read the rules and they seemed reasonable enough. Keep the lawn mowed. Don't paint your house purple. Standard stuff. The HOA president was a woman named Pam. She was a whirlwind of aggressive friendliness and passive-aggressive comments. A woman who seemed to know everyone's business and had an opinion on all of it. The trouble started, as it so often does, with a deployment. My unit was being sent on a year-long rotation to a particularly nasty corner of the world. Before I left, I tried to do everything by the book. I paid my HOA dues a year in advance. I hired a professional, bonded landscaping service to take care of my lawn, the garden, everything. I even arranged for a buddy of mine from a sister unit on base, a guy who wasn't deploying, to check on the house once a week, to pick up any flyers. To make sure everything was secure, as a final courtesy, I went to inform Pam in person. Stood in her perfectly decorated living room, explaining the arrangements I had made. A whole year? She'd said, her eyes gleaming with a strange, calculating light. My goodness, an empty house left vacant for that long. It can be such a liability for the community, a target for vandals. It brings down the property values. We'll have to keep a very, very close eye on it for you. I should have paid more attention to that comment. The way she said liability and property values. It wasn't a friendly offer. It was a threat, disguised as a concern. But my mind was on other things, on the mission ahead, on saying goodbye to my family, on staying alive. I had no idea that while I was fighting enemies overseas, a different kind of enemy was plotting to conquer my home. The first 3 months of the deployment were brutal. Long patrols, constant threats, the grinding stress of a combat zone. My only connection to home was a spotty satellite internet connection in the middle of the night. It was through that connection that the first email from Pam arrived. It was a formal notice of violation. For unkempt landscaping? I was furious. I was paying a premium for a top-tier landscaping company. I managed to get a call through to my buddy Dave. "Dude, what the hell is going on? Is my yard a mess?" "A mess," he'd said, confused. "Marcus, your lawn is the best on the block. The gardeners are there every Tuesday like clockwork. It's perfect." I realized what was happening. Pam was lying. Paper trail. I emailed her back, explaining that I had a professional service and that the violation must be a mistake. Her reply was dripping with false sympathy. "Oh dear. Well, from the street, it just doesn't look up to community standards. We'll continue to monitor the situation." It's a month later, another email. This one was far more sinister. A thick PDF document from the HOA's legal counsel. The board, it stated, had held an emergency meeting and, citing my property's chronically vacant and unmonitored status, had voted to enact a new bylaw. Bylaw 17, Section 9, the Community Hardship and Vacancy Abatement Program. The letter was dense with legal jargon, but the message was clear, because my house was deemed at risk of neglect. The HOA was exercising its right to assume temporary custodial management in order to protect the community's collective investment. I felt a cold dread creep over me. What did custodial management mean? I was in the middle of a war zone, thousands of miles away, completely powerless. I forwarded the email to a legal aid service for military members, but I knew the wheels of justice would turn slowly. The answer to what custodial management meant came a few weeks later. In a frantic, crackling satellite phone call from my buddy Dave. "Marcus, you are not going to believe this," he said, his voice a mixture of rage and disbelief. "I went by your house today, and there are people living there, a whole family. Their car is in your driveway. There's a kid's bicycle on your lawn. I asked them what the hell they were doing, and they said the HOA rented the house to them." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The heat, the dust, the sounds of the bass around me all faded away. All I could feel was a white-hot blinding rage. While I was over here sleeping in the dirt, missing the birth of my niece, watching my friends get hurt, this woman, this vulture, had rented out my home, my fully furnished home, my bed, my pictures, my life. My lawyer back in the States confirmed the nightmare. Pam, under the guise of her newly created, completely illegal hardship leasing program, had drawn up a phony lease agreement and rented my 3-bedroom, fully furnished house to a family for $2,000 a month. And the rental payments, of course, were being made directly to the Liberty Ridge Homeowners Association. She was using my house as her personal ATM. The worst part? The local police couldn't do anything. Because the family had a signed lease agreement from the HOA president, the police considered it a civil matter. They couldn't remove them without a formal, lengthy, and expensive eviction process. I was stuck. I was legally barred from. My own home and the people who had stolen it were protected by the law. The final insult. The last twist of the knife came a month before my deployment was scheduled to end. A final email from Pam. It was an itemized bill for over $10,000. She was charging me management fees for the illegal tenants. She was charging me for the landscaping service she had supposedly hired, on top of the one I was already paying for. She had, even without my permission, had the entire exterior of my house repainted a slightly different shade of beige, and was now charging me $8,000 for the mandatory aesthetic refresh. The letter concluded by stating that if the full amount was not paid within 30 days, the HOA would, as per the covenants, place a lien on my home and begin foreclosure proceedings. That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I saved the email. I printed it out. And that night, in the briefing tent, I told my lieutenant and the rest of my platoon everything that had happened. I read them the letters. I told them about the family sleeping in my bed. When I was done, the tent was silent. 12 men, hard men who had seen and done things that would break most people, just sat there, their faces grim. Then my lieutenant, a quiet, professional man who I respected immensely, looked at me. "Don't worry. Sergeant," he said, his voice low and steady, "this is not a civil matter anymore. This is a mission. We'll handle it when we get back." I landed back in the United States on a Tuesday. I didn't even stop at the base. I went straight to my house. The kid's bicycle was still on the lawn. A strange car was in my driveway. I walked up to my front door and knocked. A man I'd never seen before answered, a sandwich in his hand. "Can I help you?" he asked, annoyed. "Yes," I said, my voice tight. "You can get your family. And get the hell out of my house." He laughed. "Sorry, buddy. We've got a lease. Now get off the property before I call the cops." He slammed the door in my face. I did call the police. An officer arrived, looked at the tenant's lease agreement signed by Pam, looked at me and gave me a sympathetic shrug. "Sorry, son," he said. "This is a civil matter. You need to go through the courts. If you try to force your way in, I'll have to arrest you." I was homeless. I was a decorated soldier, just back from a combat tour, and I was being threatened with arrest for trying to enter my own home. As I stood on the sidewalk, defeated and numb, I saw it. The golf cart. Pam drove by, a smug, triumphant wave in my direction. She had one. That night I met with my platoon in a cheap motel room a few miles from my house. We didn't plan a violent assault. We planned a rescue mission to liberate my home, executed with the legal and psychological precision of a special operations raid. My lawyer was there, thanks to a call from my lieutenant to a very angry colonel on base. Uniformed captain from the base JAG office, the Army's legal branch, was there, too. The operation commenced at 0600 the next morning. Me, my lieutenant, and 10 of my guys. We were all in clean, pressed civilian clothes, jeans, and simple polo shirts. We didn't carry weapons. We didn't need them. We formed a loose, silent perimeter around my house. We didn't trespass. We stood on the public sidewalk. We stood on the street. My next-door neighbor, a fellow veteran who knew what was going on, let us use his lawn. We just stood there, silent, disciplined, watching the house. The psychological pressure of 12 fit silent men suddenly appearing and watching your every move began to work its magic. At 070, Phase 2 began. My lawyer and the uniformed JAG officer walked up to the front door. They knocked. When the tenant answered, they served him with an emergency eviction notice, citing a federal law that he had never heard of, the Service Members Civil Relief Act, the SCRA, a law that makes it highly illegal to evict, foreclose on, or otherwise seize the property of a deployed service member without a specific and very hard-to-get court order. The lease he was holding, they informed him, was a fraudulent document. He and his family were now complicit in a federal crime. They also served him with a notice of a massive civil lawsuit for damages to my property, to be filed against him personally. The tenants predictably panicked. They did exactly what we expected them to do. They called their landlord. They called Pam. And that brings us back to the moment of chaos. Pam arrived, saw us, and had her meltdown. She called 911, bringing the local police into our carefully prepared trap. As the 2 local officers were trying to make sense of her frantic, lying accusations, my lieutenant stepped forward. He was the picture of calm professionalism. "Officers," he said, his voice respectful but firm. "My name is Lieutenant Miller. This is Sergeant Thorne." He gestured to me. "And these are the men of his platoon. We are all active duty. Soldiers from the base down the road." He then explained the situation. He told them about my deployment, told them about the illegal rental. He told them about the federal law, the SCRA, that had been broken, and then the JAG officer stepped forward. His uniform, his rank, the sheer weight of the federal government he represented, sucked all the air out of the confrontation. "Officers," the captain said, his voice ringing with authority, "the United States Army has taken a keen interest in this situation. The Homeowners Association, under the direction of that woman," he said, pointing a single damning finger at Pam, "has committed a federal crime by violating the Service Members Civil Relief Act. They have illegally seized and rented out the home of a soldier while he was deployed in a combat zone." The 2 local cops looked at Pam, their eyes now filled with a dawning, horrified comprehension. She had not just called them to a silly civil dispute. She had involved them in a federal crime against a decorated soldier and his entire platoon. Lieutenant wasn't finished. He handed the senior officer a thick file. In this file, you will find evidence of wire fraud. As Ms. Pam directed rental payments for a property she does not own into the HOA's bank account, you will find evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. You will find evidence of extortion. Based on the final letter she sent to Sergeant Thorne, threatening an illegal foreclosure, we believe you have enough here to proceed with an arrest. The senior officer took the file. He looked at the uniformed JAG captain. He looked at my 10 silent, stoic platoon mates. Looked at me, the soldier who just wanted to go home. And then he looked at Pam, whose face had gone from a mask of rage to a pasty white canvas of pure terror. "Ma'am," the officer said, his voice now cold as steel, "you are under arrest." Tenants, now facing a massive lawsuit and seeing their fraudulent landlord being led away in handcuffs, immediately and completely surrendered. They wanted nothing more to do with this. And in a final stunning display of teamwork and efficiency, my platoon went to work. We didn't throw their things onto the lawn. We helped them pack. We formed a human chain, and in less than 1 hour, every single box, every piece of furniture, every toy was neatly and efficiently moved from my house to the curb. We had liberated my home. Pam is now facing a raft of state and federal charges. The story of her community hardship leasing program came out, and it turned out I wasn't the only soldier she had targeted. The class action lawsuit that followed bankrupted the HOA and sent her and her cronies into financial ruin. I got my house back. That evening, my platoon and I sat on my porch, drinking a cold beer, the setting sun casting long shadows across the lawn. My home had been violated, but it had been reclaimed. Not by me alone, but by my family. My brothers arms. This whole nightmare taught me a powerful lesson. There are some lines in this world that you just don't cross. I'm trying to steal the home of a soldier while he's overseas, fighting for the very freedoms that allow you to live in a gated community with a binder full of stupid rules is one of them. Pam thought she was taking on one single absent homeowner. Never in her wildest, most arrogant dreams imagined she was taking on the entire United States Army. You don't mess with a soldier's home, because his family will always have his six. Pam is awaiting trial, and the original HOA declared bankruptcy. But her brother, a state congressman, has just introduced a new bill to streamline the civic management of properties left vacant by deployed military personnel in planned communities, and he's asked me to testify.